I rise, giving the highest praise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the cause is cause, the root is roots from which all things have been formed. Highest of honors to his holy and divine prophet, Noble Drew Ali. I extend those honors to the forerunner, the honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who did warn and stir up the nations. I give honors to the Moorish American standard, the red flag with the green 5-pointed star representing the highest principles that are known to man, which is love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. I also acknowledge the United American Child Trading Band, also known as the American flag. I give honors to all Moorish Americans, both past, present, and future, who strive to promote this Moorish divine and national movement by way of the Prophet's holy instructions and divine laws. I give honors to all Asiatics, people of African and indigenous descent, who organize themselves to promote the interests and the prosperity of those of African and indigenous descent, also known as Asiatics. I give honors to Temple Number 19, the Office of the Grand Governor, the Lieutenant Grand Governor, the admin staff, and the mighty M19s who keep the peace. And last but certainly not least, I give honors to you, the L's and Bays, and our visitors, because when man honors man, he honors our Father God Allah. Islam?
Islam.
Moorish Holy Quran of the Moorish Science Temple of America, divinely prepared by the Prophet Drew Ali, by the guiding of his Father God Allah, the great God of the universe, to redeem man from his sinful and fallen stage of humanity back to the highest plane of life with his Father God Allah. Islam?
Islam.
It says in our divine constitution and bylaws that Friday is our holy day of rest, and it also says it in our one-on-ones, our Quran question, that Friday is our holy day of rest because that was the day on which man was formed in flesh. And this was also the day when he departed out of the flesh and ascended into his Father God Allah. Islam? There's so many ways to interpret that. And I am just going to leave it at that because we can go on for days. But what I want to specifically discuss to get your mind thinking, I can't say it enough. Friday is our holy day, and it says in our Moorish Holy Quran that the Prophet Jesus alayhi salam, on that holy day, he took a moment, or he took the time rather, to reflect and to meditate. So as we all know, reflection is the business of man, and the sense of his state is his first priority. I'm paraphrasing. So that in itself is an example of ascending to his Father God Allah. The reason why I read that first page, if you will, of the Moorish Holy Quran is because even though that is a small sentence, it was really a long sentence, it speaks volumes. It has a purpose. It gives us the ideal without even going any further of what this Moorish divine and national movement is about. It gives us an idea of what our Prophet Noble Drew Ali is about. For one, our Prophet, as all prophets, as all living beings created by the great God Allah, they're guided. Mm-hmm. They may be guided in one instance or the other, but they see a part of Allah that seems fit for their advancement, for their success, their prosperity.
Yes, Lord.
But going back to our Prophet, alayhi salam, Noble Drew Ali, he said, by the guiding of his great Father Allah, the great God of the universe, to redeem man from his sinful and fallen stage of humanity, right? back to the highest plane of life with his Father God Allah. It is important that I specify the fallen stage of humanity, because that also goes into the state or the status of where we are and who we are as a people. The idea that being quote-unquote descendants of slaves doesn't have a redeeming quality. The fact that not only that we are descendants of slaves, or it's said that we are descendants of slaves, but our identity implies that we are destined to fall. It's predetermined. And after a while, when somebody continues to tell you something and you don't have any outside source telling you otherwise, your mind starts to believe that. Like, your mind is very powerful. Sometimes we don't give credit to the mind as we should. Because the mind, as we know, has what you call a subconscious. And that subconscious, it takes in everything. Everything, right? So over a period of time, when you're told that you're less than, you start carrying yourself, even if it's subconsciously, as that. When you say that you are nothing, when it is said that you are nothing, and you come from a point of chattel servitude, saying that the only quality that you have is to be under the service of others. Going back to this long sentence, it says that Noble Drew Ali, by the guiding of his Father God Allah, came to redeem man from his sinful and fallen stage. The sinful part about it is that our mentality in our mind does not wish for a state of thought. That's the sinful part of it. And we continue to perpetuate that narrative. That is through sin and disobedience. What's interesting is that, when we talk about sin, the term for sin is actually like the opposite of what it's taken as today. It actually alludes to what you should be doing, what they call plumbing the line. But over a period of time, it developed the definition of it directing, meaning something that's ungodly, if you will. The fact that we have sinned, the fact that we have disobeyed our foremothers and our forefathers, will leave you in a fallen state. However, when you have a higher frame of thought, you think about, or you contemplate the possibilities of the greatness that you have. See, again, it always has to start from within. It starts with the mind. It starts with the thought. Thought is the cause of it all.
That's right.
So our Prophet Noble Drew Ali is charged with the redemption. And the redemption is not something that can be handed to you. It can only be presented to you. So when we talk about someone being the redeemer, or someone being the avatar of redemption, to say the least, all it is an example. It's an example of the path that you can go. You can go down this path, or you can face the suffering. But the key is, do you realize that this is a reflection of what either you can become, or what is it that's your demise? Our prophet Noble Drew Ali, by the guidance of Father God Allah, he came, the redeeming attribute that he came of is in the form of what we are supposed to be. He was that example of the highest plane of life. So again, when you have that one side of the spectrum telling you that, you know, you're not that person, you're not that group of people. Your history started when you was released by a European, or when you were so-called released, when you was emancipated, let's use the word. But it didn't give you any credentials, or it didn't give you any tools, these people that kept you in servitude, to better yourself, to raise yourself up. They did you like a stray dog. If they don't want you anymore, they just put you out there in the wild, crossing their fingers, if you will, hoping that you will meet your demise. He doesn't know how to guide himself through the woods. He doesn't know how to walk into the darkness. So eventually he will perish. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a wonderful God. That is why he is the great God. He is the great ideal. Because all people, when they fall, have an opportunity for redemption. A people would never be on the downside of Allah without first giving them a redeeming opportunity. Now, whether or not we choose to take on that redemption, that task of redeeming oneself, it's entirely up to us. See, we are the makers and the breakers of our own fate. Allah gives us the opportunity. He gives us the opportunity to succeed. He gives us every opportunity. But the key is to make sure that our eyes are open, that we exercise our five senses, that we are fully aware of the submission of Allah. It says, back to the highest plane of life of his Father God Allah. What is the highest plane of thought? Knowing yourself. Knowing who you are. I posted on social media, when one knows yourself, you win all your battles. But you got to know who you are. We lose our battles in life. We lose our battles in life solely because we either overestimated or underestimated ourselves. Our minds are not adjusting or adapting to whatever the situation is. So we end up either acting impulsively or irrationally, emotionally, and that's not in the favor of, or not conducive to the situation. And I get it, you win some and you lose some, but we have to think to ourselves, how many times have we been in this vicious cycle? How many times have we came to this bridge and failed to cross over to the other side? Sometimes to get over to that bridge, you have to pay a toll. And that toll will allow you to cross over. That toll, in the figurative sense, is your sacrifice. Your sacrifice of what is enabling you to move forward. That toll is an example of literally what is it that you're willing to give up to move on to that next level. Some of us don't understand the concept of redemption, and we think that redemption is just saying that I'm going to do something for a little while and then I'm just going to go back to, how I used to be. It's only a, I don't want to keep using the word cycle. It was only a phase, But even in the presence of tribulation, your mind, your thoughts should be on high. But that comes with understanding yourself and understanding what you're capable of doing. Do we honestly can say to ourselves genuinely that we know our potential? And if we say that we know our potential, are we exercising? Are we utilizing that? Are we making the effort? And this is coming past my ears before it hits yours. The higher plane of thought is the redeeming quality. Knowing where you come from. Not just guessing, not just thinking, not just believing, but having faith in knowing where you come from and where your roots are. That is the first step to the path of redemption. Well, that is like the second step. The first step is actually killing off, purifying yourself. But that's where that toll comes into place. Some of us, I'm from Virginia, think we still have some tolls in Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. I know I myself, even at times, we either do one or two things when we come to a toll. We look to the left and to the right, and if we don't see anybody that's going to cause us any problems and there's no bar, we keep it moving. Or if we know that toll, if we know that area has a toll or that exit or wherever has a toll, we'll bypass it and we'll choose to go the longer route because we're not willing to give up what's needed to efficiently move forward, right? And sometimes that detour becomes more troublesome than you think. Because we want to get there to our destination on time. Or if anything, if it's not in the will of Allah that we get to that destination, we should be able to get to a checkpoint, a period that we can pass on the baton. So we don't want to delay the next generation or the next person that we have to pass on this legacy to by trying to hit the detour, by trying to not sacrifice, because that sacrifice can be an example of what you're willing to do to get to that place. And people will see that. So I wanted to present a different aspect of the higher self. The higher self or the higher thought is a part of that redeeming quality. Because when you think about your higher self, when you ascend to the Father God Allah, as they say, masterminds trace themselves back, thus they know. So you're not just thinking about all the things that you've done throughout your week, which you could have done better. But you're taking a moment to think of Allah and think about, try this exercise. Try backpedaling, thinking about Noble Jurali, thinking about your forefathers. Thinking about when you get a chance on your Friday, taking a moment and thinking about the Prophet, thinking about where the Prophet has brought you from and where you are now. Think about the history of the Moorish Empire. And I know this may seem trivial or tedious, but do we really take the time to think about those things? We mention them because it sounds cold-blooded when we in those ciphers, but do we really contemplate the blessings that were given to us by our forefathers that is inherit, that we should inherit? That's part of our namesake. That's part of our estate. So the time for action has been long gone. And we have to remember, as we think about our prophet, at the time that he was in the flesh, the sacrifices that he made. And we ourselves have to think, have we made a similar or even greater sacrifice to bring this movement one step closer to the destination, which is not uncertain or unknown? Are we showing the gratefulness of the Redeemer, of this angel that was sent to warn us of the great wrath of Allah? That we can do the greatest thing that we can do is, again, redeem ourselves from this wrath of Allah, from our own downfall. Islam family. Islam. Gratitude for the brother Yosef Anfield Ill for his demonstration by way of the Pacian text. I know we often hear from our Grand Governor, which, by the way, he extends his Islam. He's under the weather, so he's not able to be with us today, or the Lieutenant Grand Governor. They both give their Islams to you all. But he often says not to throw out the baby with the bathwater in the context of, dismissing our Pacian text of the Bible. It has information, whether it's considered to be cryptic or otherwise. Amongst anything, it holds a key to who we once were and our ancestors. Being that we're Moorish Americans, being that we know that our history didn't begin with being slaves, if you will. We know that region, that era, that was us. It was only by way of our people, our ancestors being conquered, that narrative changed complexions. But Pacian text has much wisdom. Wisdom that should be, that you can definitely, as you saw with the brother demonstrated, that we can parallel to the Moorish Holy Quran. We have these tools. We have several tools. We have the Moorish Holy Quran, we have the Quran of Mecca, the Quran of Muhammad, and then we also have the Pacian text of the Bible. So we can all use that in conjunction. And we also have the Vedas and the Avestas, Sister Maya. So we also have those. So the idea, and again, when we read from the Moorish Holy Quran, it gives us keys. It tells us the very lessons that Jesus or Justice in our Moorish Holy Quran, what he learned from. It wasn't just him learning from the Jewish aspect, if you will. It wasn't just him learning from the Hamitic aspect, if you will. It was him learning from all those different doctrines that had the same meaning and that had the same principle and meaning, if you will. Maybe a different perspective, but all in all, that's how he was groomed to be a prophet, how he knew how to speak to different peoples, and how he understood, the pinnacle of wisdom, life and death, and so on and so forth. But again, Brother Yosef, gratitude. Once again, rise giving the highest of praise to Allah, highest of honors to his holy and divine prophet, Noble Ali. Gratitude once again, Sister Lamadia, for that demonstration on time and the essence of existence. Was interesting, like, I didn't even think about it. We were talking about time. And during during our Quran class, we were able to break down Surat al-Asr. In other words, the chapter about time, or the act of squeezing. Did everybody get this right here? Brother Yosef, I see you cold-blooded with the Greek over here, man. Oh, man. Asr. When you look at the figurative definition, it says time. It could also be used as epoch, period, so on and so forth. It also gives reference to squeezing, to squeeze to be exact. I can only liken it to the hourglass and them using an hourglass. Not that every person at that time was using an hourglass. They probably used some form of sundial or dial, but to reference, time to what is being squeezed. That's a very interesting concept. It also talks about the decline, or a declining motion in those that practice the faith of Muhammad. You have the Asr Salah, and in the Asr Salah, that comes about around the evening, right before Maghrib, when the sun is furthest to the west and it literally starts to set or dawn. So it also gives reference to a decline as well. But I thought it would be fitting to read the meaning of this particular surah, and then go into a brief measure. Surat al-Asr. Number, I can get back to you on that. I want to say it's in the 90s, but I can get back to you on that, I forgot. So, it says, Wal Asr, in An-Nasr, fi khus. That is the first and second verse. And it says, and time, or and a time. And a time, verily, possibly, or indeed, humanity will suffer. And then it goes on by saying, in not you, Sallallahu fi khus, in alladina amanu wa amilu salihati, and that except alladhi is those amanu. Amanu is faithful, or those who are faithful. In other words, iman comes from the word iman, which means faithful. Right action, those who do right action, and good deeds. And then the final verse says, Watawas, haq e watawas, sabr. That watawas is the derivative of the word waswas, which means to bind or to connect. That word haq is truth. And the word sabr is patience or endurance. So, simply put in the translation, there will be a time where humanity will suffer, except the faithful that does good deeds and bind to truth or wisdom and bind to patience. Islam?
Islam.
There's a quote by Dr. John Henrik Clarke. You may have heard this quote before, but it's very significant when we speak of nationality. It's very significant when we speak of sharing a collective idea to promote prosperity amongst our race, amongst nations. And he says, when you address a people by their right name, that name must relate to land, history, and culture.
Islam.
All right? Then he goes on by saying, all people go back to the geography of their original origin. Right? And then he goes on by saying in his last statement, or the last part of the statement, black tells you what you look like and not who you are. Islam?
Islam.
We have been in a constant struggle within the past few hundred years or more of suffering due to the fact that we have allowed a people to define who we are. And I'll even go so far to just say not a people, but multiple people. And in the midst of allowing people to define who we are, some of us, as I mentioned before, we develop subconsciously, we believe that. We perpetuate that. We become that ideal. That idea led us into chattel slavery. That ideal led our descendants and our ancestors to be murdered when it was proclaimed that we were emancipated, that we had a level of freedom. I'm going to pass around a map within the southwestern hemisphere, if you will, of 73 years of lynchings. And those orange dots, indicate how many of those were going on, during the years or during that time period, how many lynchings, how much lynchings, and so on and so forth. And the reason that I brought that about is because even as we were progressing after slavery, there was still a pushback from those that didn't want to see us succeed, to the point where they would murder us, that they would strip us of our families. And we see the effects today where some of us don't even have an idea of what it means to have a family. See, there's different levels of working together. You start with self. Your spirit has to work with your soul. Your spirit and soul has to work with your mind has to work with your body. It all has to do its thing so you can have a prosperous and healthy life. If any of those things are out of whack, you are going to be out of whack. So imagine coming across a people or a group of people that doesn't have everything connected, and then we look to connect. And not to say that that whole idea is not predicated on not identifying who yourself, but that plays a very important part. Because again, if you know yourself, all challenges, all battles will be won. Because you understand who you are and what you're up against. And the thing that you are up against, or the person that you are up against, is yourself. But the key is knowing that no one has the power to define who you are except for you. And it is a sad day. Thank you, sis. It is a sad day when you have another group of people or groups of people define who you are, and you allow them to trace you back to something that's less than. As I read before, John Henry Clark said, you're able to trace your geography to the source. So we as Moorish Americans, we as Asiatics, we trace our very existence to the main source, Father God Allah. So that helps to define the person that we are. That helps to establish, if anything, a foundation of the potential that we have. Every nation has suffered slavery due to the fact that they have not honored their foremothers and forefathers. Do your research on Japan. They went through what? 2 bombings? Was it 2 bombings? The official Japanese.
Are you talking just from America, or?
We can talk just anywhere.
Okay.
2 bombings. Let's just say 2 bombings. 2 or more bombings.
Yes.
Then, on top of that, they were occupied by other countries. As a matter of fact, I forgot the guy's name, but it was this particular individual that came in, and his job was to restore Japan, or get them, get the economy and the social construct of Japan up and running again because of Hiroshima and so on and so forth. But they were occupied. They had, meaning that they had a heavy European or Western thought and ideology.
That's right.
And this is a small place. Japan's not that big. But they went from that to desolation to having one of the best industries in the world. What did they do? How did they do it? What was the key? I can guarantee you the same method that they went about raising themselves up, building themselves up, or redeeming themselves. We talked about redemption earlier. It's the same formula that we in this Moorish Divine and National Movement have.
Islam.
And it's very simple. It's not complex.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a process. So we can't jump from 1 to 3. We have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. And some of us don't want to do that. We talked about paying tolls, and how some of us, if we lived up in the northern region, we're familiar with tolls. And some of us will either bypass the tolls, or, if there's no police officers, we'll try to speed through them. But we don't understand that there are steps and sacrifices that need to take place in order for us to be redeemed, in order for us to truly understand and know who we are. Islam?
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Hayya ala salah.